everyone. Welcome back to another great episode of Insights from the Couch. I am so excited for today. We're going to be talking with Dr. Juliana Hauser about holistic sexuality. You probably don't even know what that is, but you will. And agency, pleasure, and desire in midlife. How this phase of life can be the most fulfilling and exciting sexual chapter yet. She is a psychologist with a PhD in counseling education and a beloved media personality, both on screen and in print. She's a thought leader and a sexpert who dives into the hard-to-have conversations that society deems taboo. Dr. Juliana has spent the past 3 decades supporting thousands of people on their path to discovering their own sexual agency, fulfilling sexual connections, and pleasure-filled lives. Wow, let's dive in. And I thought that we might start out by asking you a little bit about, because there's about 10,000 things I want to ask you today. I feel like we could do a day-long thing, but about how you define holistic sexuality, what that means to you, because I'm really intrigued by the concept and the way you approach women and men's sexuality.
Yeah, thank you. It is the short of it is that I think holistic sexuality is twofold. One is it is a way of looking at finding out who you are. That we've been told sexuality is about the sex acts and who we're having sex with. But I think holistic sexuality means that it is the way to have a deeper understanding of the essence of who we are. So I think it's like the final frontier of self-development. And I think it's one of the hardest places to know who you are as a sexual being. So if you're looking at yourself holistically, it means in a holistic sexual way, it means you're using the lens of sexuality to be a place of self-discovery. And it's a place that is so hard to figure out that if you focus on looking at yourself in a holistic way, then you are really learning skills that will transition to other parts of yourself and other ways of learning who you are. So that's the one aspect. It's more like philosophical. And then how I truly define holistic sexuality and like the nuts and bolts of it is that there's 9 pillars of holistic sexuality. So this originally came from someone in 1981. Of course, it was a dude, and his name was Dr. Dennis Daly, and he had 5 circles of sexuality. And it was, at the time, it was groundbreaking. It was just a really big thing to just talk about sex being something more than just sex acts. But it was 81, and that was a very long time ago, and it's quite outdated, and it shocks me. As my careers progressed, I kept thinking, like, why are we still using this? Why are we? And no one redid it. So I find like, well, if no one else is doing it, then I guess I'll do it. And so I started asking questions in about 2004 and asking people, and it started off with college women, and then it progressed to just anyone you could think of all ages and all genders. I first started with, what are you sexually fulfilled? Do you like who you are as a sexual being or your sexual life? And when people answered yes to any of those questions, I started asking, well, what does that look like? What is it about that makes you feel fulfilled, and how do people define it? And I quickly learned no one defines it the same way. And right. I also started seeing that there are themes to the people who were saying yes to that question and themes to the people who were not. And I started putting them into different topics. And some of them overlapped with Dennis's circles of sexualities, and some of them didn't. And then I just progressed it to everybody, and I ended up with these 9 pillars. So they are sensuality, they are health and wellness, they're pleasure, desire, they are sex acts and interest, intersecting identities, power and trauma, relationships, and then connection. And so those are the 9 pillars that are kind of on the outside, the foundational subjects that if you are wanting to look at yourself as a holistic sexual being, that you need to hit all of those areas. And then the hub of it is sexual agency. And this is like the agency is the crux of my work. It's in everything that I do. And I believe that if you are a holistic sexual being, and we have a holistic sexual culture, which we don't have, but if we were to have that in my dream world, then agency would be the driving force, which means that we all define who we are as a sexual being on our own terms. and we don't use that definition and understanding as a way to oppress or marginalize anybody else. And we look at it all relationally. So who I am defines what I am, informs what I'm doing and with whom. And that's all I am responsible for. And then I have to figure out if I'm doing this with anybody else, that I have my yeses and nos and who I am next to somebody else's yeses and nos. And that's a lot. I'll stop there.
No,
I
no, no.
love
about
that.
ideas. Yeah.
No, no,
I mean, I've never
same.
even thought of it like that.
I've never really thought about it at all. And I'm a
I
couples
know.
therapist. I mean, I talk about sex all the time.
Yes, it's true. And I know we're not trained. I feel you're probably the same as me, that I wasn't given any training about this.
No.
I had one class, and most
Yep.
people don't even have one class.
Yep, we had
and
one
and
class too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was very narrow as to what we talked about.
Yeah.
And
Sensate focus. Sensate focus.
Yes, exactly.
That's the one thing I took away
I know, I
20 years
remember
later.
Right. Yes, which is great, but
Yes.
but it's what we're all given. We're given the addict. We're giving the addict of who we are as a sexual being, like the sex tips, and we're not given the foundation. And so holistic sexuality is the foundation. And when we put sex tips without really knowing what we are underneath all of that, then it usually falls short. It's the exception that the sex tip works if you don't understand where you're putting it into and why. And I've been on a mission for so long to try to change our education as therapists, because it's inescapable, because it's sex and who we are as a sexual being is who we are. How can we not be trained in this as therapists if we're working with people and their relationships or self-development? But that's a different soapbox too.
Can I ask you a question? I want to make sure I'm understanding this right, because I find this so exciting. So although potentially daunting, and I want to ask you about that too, like what it looks like to start on this journey. But I love how you said the final frontier of self-development is knowing who you are as a sexual being. Something that if we're two therapists working on this all the time and we haven't thought about it, probably a lot of people haven't thought about it.
Yes.
And so is it then that as you know yourself through these 9 pillars and you start to examine these pillars and get curious and ask yourself, okay, who am I? How do I show up here? You know, what brings me pleasure? What is sensual to me? All of those kinds of questions. Is it just an exploration and then you think about it and you try things potentially and you embolden yourself to have more agency and assertiveness and going after what you want? Like, I'm imagining, you know, some version of like Under the Tuscan Sun, but you go there to like learn who you are as a sexual being instead of restore a villa.
I love that.
Start that retreat.
Right. It's a yes and, but I would say it's all of that. I think the first part of it is actually just hearing that concept and thinking maybe, like, especially like if you have the reaction that you all have, which is like, oh, I've never thought of it that way. That's the first thing. Whenever I hear that, I'm like, oh, great, good. Like, that's not the bad news. It's the good news, because no one has, no one's been exposed to that. And if I can change my relationship with what sex is, then anyone can. And that also feels like the good news too. I feel like a very unlikely person to have gone into this subject matter. I started off as a kindergarten teacher. My arc of my career is so different. And not saying that kindergarten teachers aren't sexual, they are, all of those things. But I'm just like, that wasn't like I didn't wake up as this being my mission. It came to me, and I realized again, like if I'm thinking like this, if I'm curious, if this is a struggle for me, then it has to be for so many other people too. So the first part is like, okay, there's a possibility of this being something different. Then if you get exposed to like the 9 pillars of holistic sexuality in the way that I describe it, then it is like I think marketing wise it doesn't work, but I think philosophically it does. That I really look at it as a sexual audit, that you are looking at a 360 view of yourself. And I just think the word audit just makes us all cringe for tax season.
Taxes.
But
Yeah.
yes, it feels like a lot of bad things. So I don't use that word outwardly, but I do think that's really what it is. We're reflecting on who we are. And I do think that you have to do it both. You have to do an intellectual journey which includes like, an emotional aspect to it. And then you need to do like the actual, like physically figuring that stuff out. And for some, it starts physically, you're exploring it, and others, it starts intellectualizing, you do it in an intellectual way. It can be either order, and because you go back and forth. So you are thinking through it, you're feeling through it, and you're physically figuring it out along the way too. And it keeps informing itself, which is the beautiful aspect of it. The more you learn, the more you have more questions. The more you have more questions, the more you have more answers, and you get to explore more. And so it's not a one-time thing. It's not just one class. It's not just one Italian villa. It really is something that you carry alongside of you. When I work with people from I have talked to kids, like 7th and 8th graders. I haven't done any younger than that in this work, and I've gone up to people in their 80s, and I've never left a discussion without at least one person saying, "Gosh, I wish I had this earlier in my life."
Wow.
And so it really is something that we should be doing throughout this. And I think that like asking yourself these questions is really brave, because a lot of times we don't have the answers, or at least not at first. And it can feel really scary to not know, to sit there and think, I don't know. I've never been asked it. I've never thought about it, because that leads you down the road oftentimes to like, I'm doing this wrong. And so much of our sexual culture is a right or wrong. Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what I thought when you started talking. I was like, I'm assuming that there are no wrong answers to any of these questions.
Correct.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But the first thought I had when you started talking about these like sexual pillars is I was thinking, man, there are just some people that are like really sexual. And like it's like anything like athleticism or being artistic. There are some people who are just feel like an affinity with their sexuality, and where other people I think feel really cut off. Yeah. But I think that what you're saying is it doesn't matter how you enter this framework, but like none of the answers are wrong. Even if the answer is like, I really don't want to be touched. Right? Like that's its own legitimate piece of information, right?
Yeah, it is a legitimate way of being a sexual person. Too, is just we have to give ourselves permission in order to have our answer that's authentically true to us have validity to it. We have to give it to ourselves first.
Yeah.
And in order to do that and to experience it, we have to have asked it first and be asked, and have it can be done individually. It can be done privately. Because I have a course that brings people through it. I also do it in groups, and it is each way to experience the questions and the pillars is really interesting and valuable. When people do it around others, though, whether it's just with me or I have other people that facilitate it, it's so powerful to hear other people. And it's like when I do it in a group and everyone's, all it takes is one person to start risk taking and to say, and I'll go first. I'll say the hardest, most embarrassing thing first, and then
like
people
what?
will
Can
follow.
you give us an example of something you might say to get the conversation going?
Yeah. So one of the things I remember the first time that I said out loud, we were talking about self-pleasure. So masturbation, I don't call it masturbation. I use the word self-pleasure. And I said, I didn't realize that when I was hanging from a door, when I was this young girl, that that was a form of self-pleasure. And the first time I said it, I remember feeling awkward about it, but then like, oh, hell, I mean, everyone else will do it. And then there was silence. I was like, oh, no.
Oh, she stands alone.
No, nobody else did that. And like, I just thought everybody did that. And then I had someone else go, oh, well, I humped my stuffed animal. I was like, oh, that's awesome. Really? Like, which one? And then someone was like, oh, is that what I was doing in gym class on the rope? And everyone started sharing it. And it felt really long between me thinking, oh, this is just my story, to silence, to acceptance, to humor, to, all of that. And there's so many examples of where we have no idea how anyone else is experiencing it or what they were doing. And we don't know the other possibilities, but we typically feel like we're getting it wrong. So if you say it first and own it, and that's what I try to do too, is like, this is just my story. This is just how I go about it. And I try to own the awkwardness or the fear or the emotion that's attached to it. That usually helps other people to share their stories too. And also just saying, this is just mine. This is my experience. This is my yes, this is my no, this is what I've learned from it, I think makes a really big difference. We just don't have lots of space to share sexual stories and sexual experiences that we feel safe.
Right.
And there's so much shame, right? Like there's shame in this stuff and embarrassment. And it's like a lot of women feel like they just like sort of tuck it into the margins of their story. Like they don't want to really, I mean, is that your experience that people, I mean, I guess you're giving like this beautiful permission slip to sort of walk into it. But in general, do you find that a lot of women are just like, I'm good?
Well, there's a self-selection of who talks to me,
Of course.
So there's some of that too. And so people either, like when I go to events, people are drawn to talk to me and they want to share all the things, ask all the questions, or they're like, oh my God, like I can't even make eye contact with you. You're the person that talks about sex, or you're gonna ask me about sex. And so I do have a variety, but I do what I've really found is that when people understand that I genuinely care and I'm really interested in what someone has to say about anything, but particularly about their sexual life, that there is a hunger to be listened to get it off your chest, to share, to normalize it, the good and the bad parts of it. And I would say that if I'm going to be speaking specific with genders, I would say women are hungry to be asked and to have a space for it, and men are desperate.
Ooh.
Can
you say more about that part?
Yeah, that we, I mean, just in general, we don't have a healthy sexual culture, but women in general have done a better job of creating spaces to practice being vulnerable, practice normalizing and knowing what to say to each other. And in general, male-identified folks do not. So if you already don't have the skill set, you don't have the relations set up to talk about anything vulnerably or to share, and risk take, then you add the tabooness and the awkwardness and the hard part of sexuality onto it, then in general, males have even less access to safety and talking about their sexual stories or questions, and have the same desire to be normalized, to share, to understand, and to have it be better. And so when I'm able to give that space, and when men are able to give that to themselves too, I find it just flows out.
Everyone's hungry for this. So this brings a question to mind. I'm thinking about couples I work with and even conversations I've had with friends, but I'm thinking about a middle-aged woman, let's say, in a marriage. Maybe she's been married a long time to somebody she met in college. Let's just say a heterosexual marriage for the case of a case study. And she's not into the sex life at all. And it's a constant source of, desire discrepancy. Her husband wants more sex, but he's kind of given up asking because he feels rejected often. Maybe they have sex a couple times a month. And she's sort of just shut down this part of herself because she's not into it in the marriage. She doesn't know what she desires. She's never explored it. How does somebody like that, you can do it on your own, but if you're in a long-term marriage and there's all this emotional stuff, resentment and avoidance and disconnection built up around it, how does somebody like that start to explore the sexual possibilities of, who she might even be attracted to, or that there might be things out there she's never explored? And how do you get into a conversation with your partner about that?
Mm-hmm. That's such a beautiful scenario set up that it feels like a Tuesday for me. Like I hear that's just this. I hear that all the time. It is such a typical dynamic. Which, since we're all like nodding our heads and like we hear this dynamic all the time, why haven't we figured out a way, like an easier lift? Why is this something that's still a consistent chronic problem for us all? And I don't, that answer is a long answer, and it has, so many parts to it. But where I begin is I honestly like just to bring lightness to it, which is, it is amazing that anybody is having any kind of great sex at all,
Thank
because
you for saying that.
it's just the bodily functions, the all the lifts that we have to, the hurdles we have to go through. And so the fact that we have this setup that it should be happening all the time and should always feel great and wonderful and be easy and flowing and sexual and fabulous and movie stars kind of sex is just ridiculous. And then I like to talk too, like, again, bringing some lightness to it, is just, sex is so weird. It's noisy. It's there's liquids. There are,
Right.
positions and all the kinds of things that are just so ridiculous.
Angles.
Yeah, all of it's just ridiculous. So you add all the hard stuff and then just the weirdness of it all, and it's like, and this is what we want. But somehow, sometimes it magically will be awesome and beautiful and pleasure filled and all those kinds of things. It can feel like we're just always like hoping for the best of it. So I think when you can bring the curiosity and lightness and humor to something that feels pretty serious and hard and very far from where you are, where you want to be, it changes the tone of it. And that can take a while to get to that place, because there often is, by the time they come to us, it has been happening for a while. It's rare. I wish it wasn't rare, but we all know it's rare. People wait way too long to go into therapy to get support. And so we gotta just change the tone of it and instill hope. Sometimes I think, and I don't know if you all agree, that the biggest thing I do is give people hope. If I can give insight on top of that hope, but it can take a while to infuse hope into it. So after we go through that aspect of things, like in the crux of it, I think you have to understand how couples negotiate any kind of difference, and that doesn't change when you're talking about sex. So I like talking about the negotiation skills, like, what is communication inside of that, what is the power differential in it, where is the history in it, and where is the place that a couple can compromise for the relationship but not have it be a compromise of the soul. And there's going to be nuance to those differences. And then opening up for curiosity, that I really want to teach people the skill of being okay in ambiguity, so that there isn't this panic to have the quick fix, because it's not. And it will be something that I say to couples, especially if I hear a history like what you described, which is, we have a long haul ahead of us, and that's not bad news. We're not going to fix this in 2 sessions. We have a lot to sift through, and a lot that I need to learn in order to infuse myself into this. And so let's relax and let's get very curious and find all of the no's to be really good news that's giving us information, instead of, like, all the things that haven't worked are not failures to me. They're just data points.
I love that.
And let's start looking at the expansion of that. And that's, again, where hope comes in, which is like, oh, we've got so many things we can think through, so many things that we can try.
Yeah.
That ability to try without knowing if it's going to work is such a skill that couples are not taught in general. And it's what helps, like, when you can do that, then it's easier to not give up, because we have so many other things at our disposal. But if we're talking specifically about sex and how I get at that, then I think it's really important to know that what worked for you then is most likely not going to work for you now. And that we live in an era that there is so much information at our disposal. I like to really say, who cares what your Google search looks like? I want you not to worry about who is watching any of that, or who's going to see it if you die unexpectedly and have to erase your history. Like we are lucky that we can Google a lot of things, and we are lucky that we can watch things, and that we can explore what interests us, and make that be to your advantage.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really this idea of just starting to get curious together, lightening it, relax. I like that word, relax, because you're right. There's so much for so many people, not everybody, But for so many of us, along with the shame, the embarrassment, the disconnection, the fear, maybe even of what's in me that I don't know about, that I've been taught is shameful, that I don't want to discover, so many layers put on us by society that we have to sort of tell ourselves first, let's just take a deep breath and like relax into this and open up a little. It's okay. Whatever it is okay. We don't have to figure it all out right away. This says nobody's coming. The police aren't coming to the door
Right,
to
the sex police
haul
aren't
us
coming.
away
Not yet.
because I
Yes.
Google something that I've wondered about, but I've never been courageous enough to admit or explore.
Yeah. Mhm.
Right. And that's
Yes.
hard, but it's so freeing, because how
Mhm.
can we know ourselves if this part of us is locked away?
Yes, you're right. And if we think it has to always be how it always has been, and not letting ourselves, because we want to expand in so many at this time in our life or in that time in a relationship, there's so many, we do know so much more about ourselves. And this is often a place where we've let it be the last thing that we do. So there's so much. And if you can believe that, if you know who you are as a sexual being, that it infuses to all areas of your life, that it's worthy to spend the time here. That like I just think when people understand that sexuality isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It
Right.
changes the conversation about how we're going to change who we are as sexual beings and learn who we are. And if you're partnered, to then learn who you are next to them learning how they are, and how that fits together or doesn't fit together easily.
Yeah.
So tell us a story about like maybe a woman at midlife or that has one of these like sort of sexual renaissances with herself. And I'm also wondering, because I work with some people who have like relationship or sexual OCD, where they like worry that they're going to find out that they're gay, right?
Yeah.
Because, and this is real for people in midlife, is like they don't want to explore their sexuality because they do not want to get information
Yeah.
that is going to like shake their foundational world,
Mhm.
So I'm just wondering, what are some of the best case scenarios where you've seen people really like come alive after a period of being dormant with their sexuality?
That is so great. I love it. I love that question. Sometimes the answer, and I'll get specific, but sometimes the answer is people start saying no more often. And because I do think sometimes we expect the stories or the success stories to be what I'm about to share, because I know sometimes that's more interesting than hearing the stories of no. But I want to begin with sometimes the most sexually free person and the biggest transformation is when someone starts saying no to the things they don't want to be doing inside of sexual connection. And when you know what that feels like to show up for yourself and to say to yourself first, this really is a no. I don't want this anymore. This doesn't feel good. I don't like this. And I don't have to say that in an apologetic way. I don't have to be an asshole about it, but I don't have to be like, I'm so sorry. I don't want this. It's like, this isn't a yes anymore. And I would like us to try this instead. It's a no for me, or a no for me right now. And the world doesn't fall apart because you've said no to something. When you experience that, it's transformative, and it frees you up, because you cannot accept somebody's yes if you don't understand their no's, and that starts with you. And it's in reverse too. You can't really embrace your no's if you don't understand your yeses. You have to know both as an aspect of it. So that's my biggest success story, is when people learn how to say no authentically and live through it. But I'll give a couple examples, or I'll start with one and see what you think. I'm thinking particularly of someone who's given me permission to share this if it ever was relevant publicly, that she was divorced and had been really through a pretty tumultuous relationship and divorce, and wasn't able to see a sexual life as a single woman in her midlife. As we were going through her sexual history, she felt a lot of shame that it took a while. In her view, there's no right time frame, but in her view, she was thinking that took too long to have sex. It took too long. There weren't a lot of options for her. And she was convinced that was going to be the case now that she was 20 years older. and was afraid to step into her body had changed. She'd heard all these horror stories of dating apps and didn't even know how to do the technology of it. So once we got through the fears of things, and that took a while for us to get through, I have this exercise that I love. I didn't come up with it, and actually it's so out there. I don't know who did come up with it, to give them credit, but it's a diagram. I call it the 4-quadrant exercise, and we just started there. You have a list of, like, just exhaustive list of sex acts, and there's a quadrant that you put them in. And to me, it's it's such an exciting place to start an agency, because it requires you, the way that I teach people to do it is you have to have a yes or a no. You are not allowed to do a maybe. And there's no like maybe category. It's, you have sex acts that you've tried that you think you want to try again. That's a yes for you. Sex acts that you have tried that are a no for you, or you think they are right now. Sex acts that you've never tried, but sound pretty good and you think you want to try it. And sex acts that you've never tried, they're like, yeah, it feels like pretty much a no-go for me. So those are the 4 categories.
Okay, wait. I just have to say something here. First of all, I love it, but I'm thinking I might be the most sheltered person alive. I'm like, do I just not know that many sex acts? I'm like, are there 10,000 things that, because I feel like I could think of like 6 sex acts.
Well,
you're just not very creative, Colette.
I guess not. I mean, maybe more than 6. But as you're saying this, I'm going, wait a minute. What are these like sex acts that are filling this massive quadrant?
Well, that's why I do the list for you.
Okay.
So
do
you'll
you
have
give
it. But
suggestion?
I have a long list that I give, and you can Google it. You can do like list of sex acts.
Oh, we have to like post that.
Yes.
Oh my God, let's put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
We'll send it to you. Yeah. And I have the diagram. I have a diagram that you don't
can you
have to
share
yourself
it
to.
with us?
Yeah, for sure. We will.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Just remind me.
Okay.
And so it's everything from like holding hands is on the list. That is a sex act. And you can do your own list also, but I say to people, it should start with something like holding hands and end with something that you have to look up the definition to, because you've never heard like what it is. Like, that is the range of things, because I want you to be able to look at things and on the spot. I always say it's in sand, not in cement. So it's just how you're feeling today. That it's a yes or a no, a yuck or a yum, because I want you building your own trust in your body telling you yes, yuck or yum, just instantly.
Okay,
and so
wait. Can you give us like one that's? I love the holding hands. Maybe I know more sex acts than I thought.
Give us a filthy one.
A one that we wouldn't know.
And I don't judge, because I don't want to yuck somebody's yum. So so an example would be like fisting. So for somebody that would be an incredible yum to somebody, and someone else may have no idea what fisting means.
Okay, so just to clarify, putting your fist up someone's vagina.
Or anus, yes.
Can you actually?
Does it fit?
Can that happen?
It can to some people. Yeah, for some people. Mm-hmm. I mean,
you can get a fist in an anus.
You can, and you can look it up too.
Okay, and is that like a yum for a lot of people? Is that a common yum, or is that like a fetish, or?
I think. Well, I don't ever really trust sexual research, because I don't think people are honest about it. I don't think we create a lot of safety with it. So what is a lot? I think that there are. I think porn site statistics are probably the most honest of people's interests. But there's a difference of being interested in someone else doing it and looking at that and being aroused than doing it yourself. And there's a difference of like. Fantasizing about it just in the fantasy arousal versus fantasizing because I want to do it. Yeah. So I think that, something like a sex act like fisting, it may fall into different kinds of categories.
Right.
I love that nuance.
Yeah,
it's true.
Fantasy, observation, witnessing, and being aroused that way versus actually doing. So already on my soon to be quadrant, I have one yum, which is hand holding, and one yuck just for me. Yeah. No fisting for this girl, but very interesting. Yeah. And I can't wait to hear all the others.
Yes, yeah.
I feel like I'm going to learn a lot at 50.
It's so wonderful when you get, when especially if this may be one of the first times you've ever proactively made a decision if something's a yes or a no to you. Because a lot of times, like when I've been collecting people's sexual stories, a lot of times there are parts of their stories that they didn't have a proactive, intentional, and purposeful yes or no, that it either just happened to them. And I'm not necessarily saying an insult, but just a lot, there's a lot of stories that I hear along the way of like, before I knew it, we were doing this, or it just transitioned into something else and there wasn't consent. And again, I'm not talking about assault, but just even like, oh, I never even thought to ask if I wanted to do it. Or I never said, wait, let me, what are we doing now? Like, is this a yes for me? And then sometimes we don't know if it's a yes or a no until we've tried it.
Right.
And then even other times it was a no in that situation, in that context, in those details of that time of my life. But maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a yes now. So Colette, maybe in 10 years we come back and fisting is like, it's a maybe. No, probably not. Probably not. But
maybe I just haven't done it. Maybe this weekend is the time to find out.
right. So, and that's, that is on an extreme, but again, never wanting to yuck somebody's yum, because there may be somebody
no judgment.
Yeah,
no judgment on any of that. But it's just the skill of it that's the most important. It is not as important as to where you're putting the quadrants, but as to how you relate to the list, how you negotiate with yourself, where are you putting everything, and all the judgments and all the things that go along inside of it. And then if you decide to share that with somebody else, I love walking couples through this exercise of creating safety first, because all it takes is Colette, you saying like, I think I'm interested in fisting, and Laura's like, what? And then you're like, oh no, never mind. Did I say fisting? I meant, like whatever it is, or whatever it is. And imagine if you are negotiating that with a partner, and you've done all this work to check in with your yums and yucks, and you have gotten yourself in this safe place, and you are risk taking and you're sharing that I think I want to try this, or I think I don't want to try this anymore. Then imagine if a tone or if a face or whatever shuts you down. It can truly have catastrophic and huge ripple effects alongside of it. So I love teaching couples to know how to create a safe space for each other, and to have those kind of rules and negotiations before you ever step into any kind of risk sharing in this. But it's really powerful. And then once you have it, it's so interesting when I'm doing it with couples too, that I've had countless couples look at each other and be like, you've been wanting to do this whole time? And I did too. And we could have been doing that for years. Like, what?
Wow.
Or if that's changed, that was a no for you the last time I asked, but now you're thinking yes. Or I haven't wanted to do that either, and I just did it because I thought you wanted to do it, because we always do it, and let's just don't do it anymore. And they're both relieved like that. It's amazing to me, although I'm not surprised because of our sexual culture, how few of times couples really ask the questions that need to be asked of each other, and when they have the freedom and then learn to practice it, and they can do it in a safe environment, how then it starts making other questions so much easier to ask that aren't even in a sexual context.
Right.
It's so funny. As you're talking about it, I'm thinking that like there's this layer that I think exists for a lot of women. I'll own it. I think it's existed for me too, which is that women's sexuality comes up around performing for men.
Oh, yeah.
Like what do you want from me? And that it's, even as you're talking about checking in with yucks and yums, I'm thinking like, it might be really hard for me to say, I don't want something that I think my partner really wants. Like just to step into my own genuine, like what is good for me? Like, I wonder do you have to get through that layer with some women a lot of like, just being okay with it being a no and disappointing a partner or not performing for a partner. I don't know, that just
like it could make the relationship more insecure. Or a lot of people feel that. There are people, even if they don't feel like they have to perform, they're afraid not to deliver certain sexual expectations, that, it could really jeopardize the bond, and that somebody might want to look elsewhere or not be satisfied with you.
Yes. Oh, it happens a lot. And because I do think part of really owning your sexual agency has a grieving aspect to it, that if you are going to activate agency, it means you're going to have some no's. And if you're within a relationship, it invariably is going to be, there's going to be differences of what are yeses and no's to people. And so how do you negotiate? That goes back to that question, like, what's a compromise for the relationship and what's a compromise of your soul? And when it's a compromise for the relationship, then there's negotiation. And there's, you have parts to work with. When it's a compromise of your soul, that the no is the no. And you have to learn how to accept a no that isn't really awful to the relationship, and you have to learn how to give that no, because giving a yes that isn't authentically yes is as damaging to yourself and the relationship as it is giving what you are afraid an actual no is. And when that happens, and it does happen. In fact, I look for that to happen so I can help couples negotiate that. So I'll give an example.
Yeah.
Somebody wants to have a threesome. They want to know what that's like. And the other person is like, no, that's just, they've done all the search, and it just is a compromise of their soul. They do not want to do it. And so it's not going to happen in this relationship. What are you going to do with that? And so you start asking questions of like, so what about that what makes it a yes for you? So you don't shame them for wanting it. And we look at, okay, is there anything else that would fulfill that? So let's say it's the novelty of it, or it's the excitement of it. That's what they think is arousing and interesting to them. What are other things that are yeses that could feel exciting or that could feel taboo that would meet that need? It wouldn't be that specific thing, but it could meet the more emotional or attractive aspect of it. It's not the same thing, but it's not necessarily worse or lesser than. And when you can start looking at some of the whys without fear of judgment, then it opens up the possibility of it not feeling like this huge loss and disappointment or lack of performance. It's a shift of, I can't do this, but I can do that. And sometimes it is the actual disappointment. Well, I just really wanted to try that. And that just sucks. That if I stay with you and I stay loyal to our what we've decided is right for our relationship, then I won't ever get to experience that. And that for some people is a very big deal. For others where it isn't, and it's like, well, okay, but I still want to try something else, then it's something that strengthens the relationship rather than hurts it. And so many people are so afraid it's going to be catastrophic that then they never go there. And that avoidance is what ends up ruining things and being
ruins everything. Yeah. So do you find, well, two things I'm thinking. One, is it true that most people in real life have to work at their sex life if they want it to really be good?
Yes.
Because we're all so different, right? We're all so different.
And we change, and our what is true for us this morning could be different tonight.
Right.
And what happens emotionally and physically and spiritually, like so much informs and influences our sexual life that we have to keep up with it. And yes, again, it's a big fluid changing thing, which is again why I think it's not a luxury, it's a necessity to be prioritizing it, because it's always changing, and it's also always in our face. It is impossible to not see a movie, advertising, a news thing, the politics. It is everywhere, and so if we're avoiding facing it, then we're actually causing a lot of problems. And if we can do a 360 on it and see it holistically, then we get to incorporate it and have a lot more choice and health to aid us.
Wow.
And I'm wondering, like, is there, like, with these 9 pillars, is it always different, like the doors that people need to walk through, like the pain points, or is there like an easy beginning place to start accessing with these pillars?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So I've been working on these for since 2004. So I have been in this where I think about it all the time. And so I have an order that when I do it through my course, that I put people through, and I've changed it through the years. And in the past, probably like 7-8 years, I know I have the order right for it because I've done it with so many people. And so the first place that we always start is sensuality. And sensuality was something that I kind of go back to something that you were saying earlier, Laura, about like there's just some people who seem to be more sexual than other people. I thought that personally was the case with sensuality. I would have never described myself as a sensual person back in the day. And I had a viewpoint, a stereotype of what a sensual woman was. And she lived in Bali, and she had flowy skirts and wore a certain outfit, and she talked a certain way. And I don't say that disrespectfully. I just like, that's sensual. Yeah. That is not me. I can be sexual, but not sensual, or whatever that was. I could perform sensually and mimic what I thought something was, but it was never true and authentic to me. And admittedly, I felt bad about myself for that. I thought I'm a lesser sexual person because I'm not sensual in that way. And when I started exploring and researching and learning and asking people, it's like, no, that's not accurate at all. We're all sensual beings, and we all are have a sensuality to us. We just have to find our own brand of that. We all have different access to the 5 senses, and we all don't have access to all 5 of them or the same level of it, but we all have access to some of them. And so the first thing that we do, so that's why I start there, is that sensuality is not benign. I used to say sensuality was easy. I've learned not to say that at all because it isn't. Not any of them are easy, but we all can do it. So we'll start with touch. And I walk through the 5 senses and make it applicable, inclusive to everybody. And touch is one of them. So I have these 4 types of touches that come from tantric practice. And I ask people to do a yuck or a yum to it. I love doing it in an audience when I'm speaking. So I'll do like here's water. I'll have everyone do water. And I want you to shout out yuck or yum.
Wait, what? Just like doing water going down?
It's a light touch, and you just have movement to so it's like a light touch that way. So that's water. Yeah. And then I'll do the exhibit. So this is ground. So the ground has like a firmer touch to it. And so I was like, yuck or yum. And people will be like, yuck or yum. And after you do the first time, especially if you do it around somebody else and you have a different answer than somebody else to it. It's like, for me, I love ground. Air is this. Air is like a really, really light touch. I do not like, or when I first started doing this, I was like, ugh, yuck on air. Like, that's just gonna make me like swat you away. But
but do you actually touch with air, or it's like just almost there?
Yeah, it's almost like if you were to close your eyes, you could feel the heat or the presence of it, and every once in a while it goes up against it.
Yeah, I don't like it either.
Look at your faces.
Yeah. Okay, but what about I have a question though. Okay, so this one makes my skin like itch a little. I like the ground. Yum to the ground. Is there one that's like being touched like the way you would pet a dog?
So that would probably be a little bit more of air to it, but it also could be fire. So that's the 4th one. So fire has more of an unexpectedness to it. That's like raking or like pinching or slapping, but it could be like a petting like that, or that could be considered grounding. It just kind of depends.
Okay. Because I like that. I like to be pet like I'm a dog.
Love it. Yes. See, I love it. Now we're going to support you, Colette, and knowing that you have a yum.
I'm not going to laugh at you.
That's my yum. Just treat me like a golden retriever.
Yes. And see, I find that so exciting. I love it when somebody finds their yucks and yums. And when you're doing this, so I get like when I'm doing this in a group, and I'll ask everyone's puts their hands up. I'm saying yucks and yums. After we do the first one, I'm like, all right, what did that feel like to own it? What did it feel like to hear someone else doing it differently? Let's talk through that difference. Are you embarrassed? Are you telling yourself you're doing something wrong? Especially when the majority of the room is a yum and a couple people are like, yeah. Ooh. And they're like, oh, really? And I talk about this example that I had.
What if you're the only yum?
Oh, exactly. And you're like, oh, freak. Or you start telling all these words to yourself. And then the next time you're quieter or you don't answer or you wait until you hear how everyone else is. It's just such an example of how we are given this right or wrongness to who we are, and we don't give permission to do this. So I remember this time that I was doing air with somebody, and this woman was like, I was like, and I don't like air. And this woman was like, really? Because that's my number one. And I wanted to be like, what? And I know not to ever act on that or say that out loud. So I was like, ooh, tell me more. And the way she described it, I was like, okay. I mean, that's not bad. And it was fascinating to me, one, that we can be so different. And two, that I loved that listening to her reasoning, her why, that it was a yes for her, made me interested in it and made me curious about it. And that's what you're wanting for yourself. It still could be like, and frankly, don't give me air on my back. Don't do it. But I like it on my head. And I discovered that. So when you take touch, you start here. That's how I like to start people. Then you put it to other areas. You do the 4 touches on your head, on your feet, on your genitals, on your back. You try all different places, and you do it to yourself. Then if you have a partner, you do it with a partner. I love doing it with platonic relationships. First, I think it's fascinating to do that kind, and it's a bit of sensate therapy, but doing it with
Laura,
somebody
I'm going to air you. I'm going to air and fire you.
I might swat you.
Exactly. Like, this is a yuck for me. Respect my yucks. And
I'm German. I have lots of yucks.
My last name is Hauser. I'm German too. I get it. So again, like, I would imagine if I was to have stopped time and said to you, what did you think of sensuality? And that there's just so much to it that you may be surprised as to already you can tell how far we can go. And that just gave you just a little bit of what starts. And that's just a little bit of sensuality. And we just did one of the senses, and look how much we learned about each other, about how do we negotiate and talk and look at our differences and our similarities. Imagine if one part of one of the 9
pillars.
Imagine by the time you get through all of it, there is no stone unturned about who you are. Again, so that goes back to, you just know who you are.
It's fascinating because I would describe myself as a sensual person. And I would describe myself as a sensual person, maybe even more than sexual. And yes, I would say that. And then that's not even something I thought of, what we just did, as sensual. So it's so interesting that that's something I identify, and still that one little bit of that one pillar that I already identified with was something totally new and made me think and stretch.
Yes. Love it.
That's my gosh. So you have to also make sure you tell us and our listeners, how can people take your course? Because this sounds fabulous.
Oh, great. Thank you. And I really want, what my passion is to change the conversation about sexuality in this way. So even just listening to this podcast or having you all feel excited and interested in this endeavor, it feels like that's the value add of this, because the ripple effects of that is enormous. And thank you for being practitioners who are in this space. I mean, we're in the trenches together, and and we have our own lives that we're trying to live on top of helping other people with their lives. So I first want to say that to you all. Sorry, my headphones keep coming out. And then next, people can take Revealed. That's the course that I'm speaking about. In several different ways. I have a digital aspect that is on my website, and then the Revealed Life website. There's videos, and then there's the manual that you go through, the holistic sexuality. And then I have people who are facilitators of it. So it's Revealed, the course is in 8 countries, and it's spoken in 5 languages at this point. Wow. And so you can take it individually with facilitators and myself. You can do it in a group with the facilitators or with myself. And then you can become a facilitator as well and bring it. And I don't require that you have to be a therapist. Wow. I actually have different criteria that I sift through in order to become a facilitator. because I think it should be accessible. And I have everyone from nurses to sex workers to real estate agents to accountants that actually facilitate Reveal, because I do think none of us are educated in it. And the way that I have set up Revealed is it is built to be in agency. So even if you're doing it in a group, it is individually led and collectively experienced. So the facilitators are facilitating it. They're not your expert. They are helping you find your own expertise. It used to be called Be Your Own Sexpert. I used to call it that. And then I changed it to
I love Revealed.
Yeah.
So tell our listeners your website, and we'll have it in the show notes, of course, but I want people to be able to look it up right now while they're hearing you.
Oh, great. Yeah. So it's Dr. Juliana with one N .com is my website. And then on all social media, it's Dr. Juliana Hauser.
Oh my gosh. And then you have another book coming out, right? And
I
you have
do. Yes. I'm so excited. It's taken so long, but the book is called A New Position on Sex, a guide to greater sexual confidence, authenticity, and pleasure. And it's coming out fall 2025. I'm so thrilled about it. We're doing the book launch strategy now and planning all the events. And I'm so excited to bring it out into the world. And we'll be launching my graphic that's related to the 9 pillars of sexuality to replace the circles of sexuality. And
so this will be in the book. This will be in the book then. Some of what we talked about.
All of what we talked about. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I walk them through all of the 9 pillars. Yeah. And then for those who are therapists that are listening, I also have a course and workshops that are geared towards helping therapists learn what you need to learn first about yourself, and then about how to be a holistic sexual practitioner. Because I know it's just so hard for it to be available. And we don't have a lot of time anyway to be learning new things on top of it. But since we have to do our licensure credits, I got that and have made it so that you can take these courses. You can even take Revealed, and it counts towards your licensure credits. And then it benefits you.
Let's do it, Laura.
We're definitely going to do it.
Yes,
we're going to do it.
I love it. Great. Awesome. It's wonderful.
Yay.
Thank you all so much for not being afraid of this topic as well, to talk about personally and professionally. It's often left out of the wellness conversations. It's left out of our licensure. It's left out of our education. It's left out of the conversations. And I get it. It is something that is still a bit taboo. So thank you for being brave enough to bring it onto your podcast.
Oh, thank you for sharing.
Thank you for your work. It's so exciting.
It makes me feel so hopeful for us as women at midlife, for all our listeners, whether you're at midlife or any other stage, just that this doesn't maybe have to be so scary or difficult, but rather this is about freedom and self-connection and possibility and feeling more alive and having a better relationship with yourself, whatever that looks like. And I just think that's a beautiful thing. So this was amazing.
Yes. Thanks so much for coming on.
And maybe you'll come back when your book comes out too, and we can have you on again.
We'll go in a deeper dive into the pillars.
So fun.
And then maybe Laura and I will have taken Revealed by that point. And we'll be ready to ask you even harder stuff than fisting. I'll be reporting back after the weekend, Juliana.
Yes. Please, you've got my cell phone number. You can text me.
We'll see if it's yum or yuck.
Oh, jeez.
I tease. But I think it's great. I think it's great to have fun, be creative, and just like open up some possibilities, whatever that looks like. So thank you for this wonderful conversation.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Well, we hope you got some insights from our couch today. If you like what you heard, and we hope that you did, don't forget to subscribe, share with a friend, and write a review. It really helps us get our message out. Thanks for being here.
Bye, guys. See you next time.
Bye.